You think you grew up, you think your childhood is over. But the child you once were is still making your choices. Right now, this very moment, that tender, frightened, hopeful being who looked at the world through eyes that hadn't yet learned to protect themselves, they're still here, still living inside you, still reacting, still trying to get your attention in the only ways they know how. And here's what nobody wants to admit. Most of your adult life, the relationships you choose, the patterns you can't seem to break, the anxiety that wakes you at 3 a.m, the way you freeze when someone criticizes you, none of that is really about now, it's about then. It's about a wound that never closed, because nobody taught you how to look at it without flinching. You see, we have this beautiful illusion that time heals, that growing older means growing past our pain. We get taller, we learn bigger words, we master the art of looking confident, and we tell ourselves we've moved on. But moving on and healing are two entirely different things. Healing is what happens when you finally stop running and turn around to face what you've been dragging behind you all these years. And what you've been dragging is a child. Your child. The one who needed to be held and wasn't. The one who needed to be seen and felt invisible. The one who learned very early that their feelings were too much, their needs were inconvenient, and their authentic self was somehow wrong. That child didn't disappear just because you learned to hide them. They went underground, into your body, into your nervous system, into the automatic reactions you have that make no logical sense, but feel absolutely overwhelming. They're in every relationship where you give too much and receive too little. They're in the voice that whispers, late at night, that you're fooling everyone, and someday they'll discover the truth. So let me be clear about what we're exploring together. Healing your inner child is not a side quest. It is the journey. Because until you turn toward that forgotten part of yourself, your life will continue to be a series of repeated patterns, different faces, different circumstances, same wound, same desperate question, am I enough? The answer isn't out there. It never was. The answer is in learning to look inward with courage instead of shame. Before anyone told you who to be, you simply were. Think about this for a moment. Before you had a name, before you knew words like good or bad, before you learned that crying made people uncomfortable, there was just pure awareness. You looking at existence with no filter, no story, no judgment about whether you were doing it right. You didn't wake up as a baby thinking, I wonder if I'm crying correctly today. You just experienced directly, immediately, with a kind of openness that most adults spend their entire lives trying to recapture. That openness, that original way of being, that's what I mean when I say inner child. Not some sentimental memory, but your first mode of consciousness, your original operating system before the world installed all its programs. Imagine standing by the ocean as a small child. The waves come in, cold and alive, and you're not thinking about whether the ocean likes you or whether you deserve to be there. You're just experiencing the water, the salt air, the way the sand disappears under your feet. That's direct experience. That's being alive before you learn to be anything else. But then something happens. Slowly, like dust settling on a mirror, the world begins to cover up that original seeing. Your parents, your teachers, your culture, they start giving you feedback. Don't cry, be strong, stop being so sensitive. You're too much, you're not enough, and so you learn. You learn that to be loved, to be accepted, to be safe, you need to edit yourself. You need to become someone more palatable, someone less you. You learn to split yourself into two parts, the part that feels everything and the part that shows up in public, the real self and the acceptable self. Now, I need you to understand something crucial. What we call growing up is in most cases really just learning how to betray ourselves efficiently. We call it maturity, but what it often means is that we've gotten very good at ignoring our own hearts. We've learned to dismiss our feelings, to override our instincts, to choose what looks good over what feels true. And we perform so well for so long that we forget we're performing at all. We think the mask is our face, but underneath, that original consciousness is still there, still feeling, still hurting, still hoping that someday someone will see past the performance. Spiritual awakening is really about returning to that original way of seeing. Not naively, you can't unknow what you know, but directly, clearly, without all the layers of fear and judgment. When people meditate deeply, when they have those moments of sudden clarity, they're touching that original consciousness, that child who knew how to be present without needing everything to be perfect first. Healing your inner child isn't about going backward. It's about removing the layers that made you forget what it felt like to be real. It's about reuniting with the part of you that still knows how to feel without apologizing for it, the part that understands without needing proof that existence itself is extraordinary. You spent decades trying to become someone impressive, someone worthy of love. But here's the secret. You were worthy before you did anything, before you achieved anything, before you proved anything to anyone. You were worthy simply because you existed. And somewhere inside you, that child remembers this, still waiting for you to remember too. Let me tell you something uncomfortable but true. Most of your reactions aren't about what's happening now. They're about what happened then. You're at work, and your boss gives you feedback, constructive, professional feedback, and suddenly your heart is racing, your face is hot, and there's this voice screaming, "I failed. I'm not good enough. They're going to realize I'm a fraud." Part of you knows this reaction is disproportionate. But that knowledge doesn't stop the feeling, because in that moment, you're not really in your office. You're 6 years old, standing in front of a parent who looked at your report card with disappointment. You're 8 years old, bringing home art you're proud of, and hearing, "That's nice, but couldn't you have tried harder?" The unhealed child doesn't care that you're 40 now. When it feels that old feeling, criticism, disappointment, the threat of losing approval, it takes over. And suddenly you're not responding to your boss. You're responding to every authority figure, whoever made you feel small. This is what I mean when I say the inner child runs your life. Not obviously, not dramatically, but subtly, constantly, in ways you don't even notice. Think about your relationships. Do you constantly seek reassurance? Text someone again and again, needing to know they still care, panicking if they don't respond immediately. That's not neediness. That's a child who learned that love is unstable, that people leave, that if you're not vigilant, you'll be abandoned without warning. Or maybe you're the opposite. Maybe you pride yourself on not needing anyone. You're independent, self-sufficient, strong. But underneath that strength is a loneliness you don't let yourself feel. That's the child who learned that needing people leads to pain, that asking for help is weakness. We play out these patterns everywhere. In romantic relationships, we unconsciously seek partners who remind us of our parents. Not because we're masochistic, but because our psyche is trying to heal the original wound. We think, if I can just make this person love me, then I'll finally be okay. But we're not really trying to win their love. We're trying to go back in time and win the love we never received. The inner child seeks parents in partners. It seeks safety and control. It seeks validation in performance. It overworks, overachieves, always trying to prove it deserves to exist. It people pleases until exhausted, because deep down it believes that if it stops giving, it will be abandoned. And here's what makes this insidious. You're not aware it's happening. You think you're making conscious choices, but you're not. You're responding to the past. You're wearing it like a lens through which you see everything. Your partner says they need space, and you hear, "I don't want you." Your friend cancels plans, and you hear you don't matter. Your colleague disagrees, and you hear you're stupid. The present moment becomes just another stage for the same old drama. People in their 40s, 50s, 60s, still trying to earn love from people who will never give it. Still trying to prove their worth. Still running from a rejection that happened decades ago. And they don't understand why they're so tired. why nothing they achieve ever feels like enough, it's because they're trying to fill a hole that was dug in childhood. And no amount of success, no relationship, no external validation will ever fill it, because the hole isn't really a hole. It's a separation, a split between who you are and who you learnt you had to be. Until you turn around and look at that child, until you acknowledge its fear and pain, your life will be repeated patterns. Different cities, different jobs, different relationships. But underneath the same wound, the same question, am I enough? The answer is not out there. It's in learning to turn toward that child and say, I see you, I hear you, you're not crazy for feeling this, and you're not alone anymore. It's not just that you had a difficult childhood, it's that we live in a culture that systematically teaches children to abandon themselves, to cut off from their feelings, to become strangers to their own hearts. Think about the messages transmitted from the earliest age, from normal, well-meaning parents, from schools, from society. Big boys don't cry, as if tears were a defect rather than the natural language of the soul. Stop being so sensitive, as if sensitivity were weakness rather than the capacity to experience life fully. Don't be selfish. Think of others first. Translation: your needs don't matter as much as everyone else's comfort. Be strong, be brave, which really means don't show vulnerability, don't ask for help, don't let anyone see that you're human and afraid. We teach children that to be loved, they must edit themselves. They must become smaller, quieter, more convenient. They must learn to sense what adults need and contort themselves to provide it. And so the child learns to split. There's the self they really are, the one who feels deeply, who gets scared, who needs comfort, and then there's the self they show the world, the good child, the strong child, the child who doesn't cause problems. This is what I mean by the social mask. We create a character that looks mature, responsible, together. But inside, that child is terrified and alone, wondering if anyone would love them if they saw what was really beneath the surface. And the tragedy is that this splitting isn't just emotional, it's existential. When you learn to hide your real feelings, when you learn to dismiss your own needs, you lose touch with the very ground of your being. You become homeless within yourself. Many people walk through life feeling like imposters, like they're playing a role, but there's no one really home. They achieve things, accumulate relationships, check all the boxes, but there's persistent emptiness. Something essential is missing. What's missing is you, the real you, the one you abandoned 40 years ago because nobody taught you how to stay. And we do all this in the name of maturity. We call it growing up. We tell ourselves that mature people don't need others, don't feel too much, don't cause waves. We wear our independence like armor, never realizing what we're really wearing is protection for a child who was never shown it was safe to be themselves. Some people even use spirituality as armor. They become above their emotions, too evolved to feel anger, too enlightened to need anything from anyone. But that's not spiritual maturity. That's spiritual bypassing, using spiritual concepts to avoid being human. It's another way of saying to that inner child, you're embarrassing, hide, but you can't be truly whole while half of you is locked away. And all the while, that child waits in your anxiety attacks, in your chronic sense of not enoughness, in your people-pleasing, your perfectionism, your inability to say no, in every relationship where you give everything and receive crumbs, in your late-night spirals when you wonder why you feel so empty despite having everything you thought you wanted. The cost of this self-abandonment is enormous, but it doesn't have to be permanent. You can learn to turn toward yourself instead of away. You can become for yourself what no one else ever was, a safe place, a home. So how do you actually begin? How do you heal this split that's been running your life? The answer is simpler and more difficult than you think. You turn toward it. You stop running. You stop trying to fix it or transcend it. You simply turn around and face what you've been fleeing from. But let me be clear. We're not taught how to do this. We're taught to push through, to move on, to be strong. We're taught that looking at old pain is dwelling on the past, that it's self-indulgent or weak. But that's backwards. Ignoring pain doesn't make it go away, it just makes it louder. Turning toward is different. It's not about wallowing. It's about finally being willing to acknowledge what's actually there. Here's what this looks like in practice. You're having a conversation with someone you care about. They seem distracted, distant, and suddenly you feel it. That wave of panic, that tightness in your chest, that voice saying, "They don't care about me, I'm losing them." Most of us either react, get defensive, pick a fight, or suppress. Pretend we're fine, swallow the feeling. But there's a third option. You pause. You notice what's happening inside you, and instead of judging it, you speak to it. You might say internally, "I see you. I see that you're scared right now. I see that this feels like being abandoned. And I want you to know you're not crazy for feeling this. This is real for you." That's it. That's the turning toward. It's not complicated, but it's profound. Because in that moment, you're doing something maybe no one ever did for you. You're acknowledging the feeling instead of dismissing it. You're making space for it instead of trying to erase it. Think about awareness like sunlight. The sun doesn't force the flower to grow. It doesn't critique the flower. It simply shines on it. And in that light, the flower naturally unfolds. This is what awareness does for your inner child. You don't have to be perfect at it. You just have to be present. You have to stop treating your pain like an enemy and start treating it like a lost part of yourself trying to come home. When you do this consistently, the child inside you begins to trust you. It begins to relax. It stops screaming quite so loudly because it knows it's being heard. The panic lessens. The reactivity softens. Not because you fixed anything, but because you finally stopped running. Let me be clear. This isn't about indulging every feeling or making your emotions the center of everyone's universe. It's about creating an internal relationship. It's about learning to be with yourself the way a good parent is with a frightened child. Calm, present, reassuring. You become the one who says, "I know you're scared, but we're safe now." You become the one who says, "I know you feel invisible, but I see you." You become the one who says, "I know you think you have to be perfect to be loved, but you don't. Not anymore." This is the beginning of real healing. Not because you've erased the past, but because you've changed your relationship to it. The wound doesn't go away, but it stops controlling you. The child doesn't disappear, but it stops running your life through fear. And here's the paradox. The more you turn toward your pain, the less it hurts. The more you acknowledge your need, the less desperate you become. The more you embrace your vulnerability, the stronger you actually feel. This is the practice, and it changes everything. Now we come to the heart of it. Turning toward your inner child is the beginning. But there's something more, something that transforms this into a way of living. And that's learning to reparent yourself. Don't let the word fool you. This is one of the most spiritually revolutionary things you can do. You're becoming right now the adult you needed when you were small. You're creating within yourself a presence that offers what was never given. Safety, acceptance, unconditional regard. Think about what a good parent does. They don't just respond when the child is screaming. They create an environment where the child feels safe enough to exist as they are. They set boundaries to protect. They say no to things that harm. They say yes to things that nourish. They don't require the child to earn love through performance. This is what you're learning to do for yourself. And it shows up in the smallest ways. It's noticing when you're exhausted and choosing rest instead of pushing through to prove how productive you can be. It's saying no to a request that violates your peace, even though disappointing someone feels uncomfortable. because protecting your inner child is more important than being liked by everyone. It's speaking to yourself with kindness when you make a mistake. Instead of self-criticism, "You're so stupid, how could you do that?" you catch yourself. You pause and you say, "Okay, I made a mistake." That's what humans do. It's okay. It's choosing relationships and environments that feel safe, and having the courage to walk away from ones that don't. Because your inner child doesn't need you to keep proving yourself to people who will never see you. It needs you to take it somewhere it can breathe. Here's a story. A woman in her 40s spent her childhood trying to earn her father's approval. Nothing was ever quite good enough. She learned that love was something you had to achieve through perfect behavior. Decades later, she's in a relationship with an emotionally distant man. She works harder, gives more, tries to be more understanding. She's exhausted. But she doesn't leave, because leaving feels like giving up, like admitting she wasn't good enough. But one day, something shifts. She realizes every time she stays in this dynamic, she's repeating the pattern. She's abandoning herself to win love from someone who can't give it. She's making that little girl inside her beg all over again, and she realizes, I have a choice now. I didn't have one back then. I was a child, but I'm not anymore. So she leaves, not in anger or bitterness, but in a quiet act of self-protection. She says to that child within her, I won't make you beg anymore. I won't make you shrink to fit into spaces that aren't meant for you. I'm taking us somewhere safe. That's reparenting, making different choices today. Choices that honor the part of you that's been waiting for someone to finally choose you, and then being that someone. I've often talked about self-love, and people misunderstand. They think it's about inflating the ego, but it's not. Self-love is recognizing that you are a manifestation of life itself, and life doesn't hate itself for existing. Life flows when you love yourself. You're simply allowing that natural flow to include you. Reparenting is that. It's removing the obstacles to your own aliveness. It's dismantling the program that says you have to earn the right to be here. It's saying to that frightened child, you don't have to perform anymore. You don't have to be anything other than what you are. And I'm not leaving. Every time you make a choice that honors your inner child, you send a message to your entire nervous system. Things are different now. We're safe now. And slowly, your body begins to believe it. The hypervigilance softens. The anxiety lessens. You stop living in survival mode and start living in presence. This is the essence of healing. Not fixing, not erasing, but reuniting. Bringing back together the parts of yourself that were scattered. You become whole. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole. And in that wholeness, something remarkable becomes possible. You stop living from need and start living from fullness. You stop chasing love and start recognizing it when it's real. You stop abandoning yourself for others and start building a life that actually feels like yours. So what happens when you actually do this work? When you stop running from the child within and start running toward it. Let me paint two pictures. Same person, two different realities. First picture, someone who hasn't done this work. They're successful by most measures, good career, maybe a family, a home, but inside they're exhausted. There's chronic anxiety that never quite goes away. Their relationships are strained because they can't stop seeking reassurance, or they can't stop withdrawing. They work too much, drink too much, anything to avoid the emptiness. They've built a life, but they don't really feel alive in it. They're hoping that someday, somehow, they'll finally feel okay. But that day never comes. Second picture. Same person, but they've done the work. They've turned toward their inner child. They've learned to reparent themselves. They still have challenges. Life hasn't become perfect, but their relationship to challenges has changed. When criticism comes, they feel it, but they don't collapse. They can hear feedback without interpreting it as total rejection. When someone they love is upset, they can be present without assuming they're about to be abandoned. They can say no without drowning in guilt. They can be alone without feeling lonely. Most remarkably, they're no longer haunted by that chronic sense of not enoughness. They don't wake up trying to prove their worth. They know at a deep level that they're okay. Not perfect, not without flaws, but fundamentally okay. And that changes everything. Their relationships become deeper, more authentic, because they're no longer performing. They're no longer desperately trying to be what they think the other person needs. They can show up as themselves. Sometimes people leave, and it hurts, but it doesn't destroy them, because they're not getting their entire sense of worth from external validation. Their creativity returns. Because when you're not spending all your energy managing anxiety and seeking approval, there's space for something else to emerge. Curiosity, playfulness, the capacity to create for the sheer joy of it. They laugh more easily, they cry more freely. Not because they're unstable, but because they're more alive. They've stopped numbing themselves. They've stopped living in their heads, analyzing everything. They've come back down into their bodies, into their hearts, into the present moment. Life isn't a problem to be solved. It's a mystery to be experienced. But you can't experience it fully if half of you is still trapped in the past. You can't dance if part of you is still in chains. When the inner child heals, those chains fall away. Gradually, consistently, beautifully, and you discover that life can be joyful, that existence can feel like a gift instead of a burden, that you can be both vulnerable and strong, both sensitive and resilient. You stop living just to survive and start living to experience. You stop asking, am I enough? And start asking, what do I want to create? How do I want to love? What does it mean to be fully alive? This is what healing looks like. Not perfection, not the absence of pain, but the presence of wholeness, the capacity to hold all of yourself with compassion and without judgment. And here's the final paradox. You spent years trying to be someone else, someone better, someone more acceptable. But what you discover when you heal is that the person you were always meant to be was the one you abandoned all those years ago. That child who felt deeply, who wanted connection, who saw the world with wonder. That child was never the problem. The problem was that no one taught you how to honor them. But now you know. Now you can. So here we are, at the end of our time together, though this isn't really an ending. It's an invitation. Turn around, look at the child within you. The one who's been waiting, the one who's been hoping, the one who's been trying so hard to get your attention. You don't have to fix them. You don't have to save them. You don't have to make the past different. You just have to see them, acknowledge them, let them know they're not alone anymore. Maybe there was a moment in your childhood when you felt utterly invisible, when you needed someone and no one came, when you cried and no one heard, when you were afraid and no one told you it would be okay. That moment doesn't have to define you anymore, because now today you can become the one who shows up. Not for the child you were back then. You can't reach through time, but for the child you still are. The one who's still here, still feeling, still hoping. Healing isn't about rewriting your history. It's about changing what happens now. It's about choosing right now to stay with yourself instead of abandoning yourself, to speak kindly instead of cruelly, to protect instead of punish, to welcome instead of reject. And when you do this, when you finally become a home for yourself, you'll discover something extraordinary. The life you've been searching for, the peace you've been chasing, the love you've been begging for from others, it was always here, waiting inside you, in the very place you were most afraid to look. The inner child doesn't need you to be perfect. It doesn't need you to have all the answers. It just needs you to be present, to be willing, to be there. And presence is something you can offer right now, not tomorrow, not next week, not someday when you're ready. Right now, this moment, this breath. So take that breath, feel your body, wherever you are, and know that wherever you are, whoever you are, whatever you've been through, you're not too late, you're not too broken, and you're not alone. The child within you is still here, still hoping, still waiting. And the beautiful thing, you're finally ready to meet them. Welcome home.